You can subscribe to my other channel, Black Belt Secrets, for my personal opinions. And I also have another channel on money. That is Daniel Shensmith, linked in the description below. So thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate that. So what has spawned this video? Well, I've been reading through some comments and people have been talking about the money spent here, there and everywhere and on everyone, but it would seem for many people throughout the UK that really deserve it. And I've been looking at some statistics and where the money goes. And there was another comment that somebody mentioned about legal migrants to the UK getting NHS services, and they said that is a benefit, but it's not free. And in fact, none of that is free, and it will stagger you as to what these things cost. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's have a look at one or two figures. For example, let's look at money spent in and on Ukraine. This is not to say that it is not a worthy cause or anything else. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this is where some of the money goes. Now, since the invasion by Russia, in total, the government official word on the matter is that the UK has committed £12.8 billion on Ukraine, 7.8 billion in military support and 5 billion in non-military support. And Keir Starmer has made it absolutely clear that that commitment to Ukraine is ongoing. And not only that, Keir Starmer has also recently announced £11 million in aid for Syria. Again, that's not to say that the aid money is a bad thing to help the people that do need it, but one does have to question the regime now in control of Syria, which still, as of this date, is a spur-off group of Al-Qaeda, which is still on the terror group of banned organizations by the UK. And Keir Starmer says there is no decision pending on removing this rebel group, because it is a rebel group that has essentially overthrown the regime of Assad. Now, however bad that regime was, it's been overthrown by rebels that are currently on a terror group list for the UK. So Keir Starmer says there is no decision pending to remove them from this banned list, and yet committing £11 million. And so that does raise the question, to which I don't really know the full answer, as to who exactly is controlling that money, where the money goes and how the money is being used, and ensuring that it is not literally in the hands of terrorists, because this is a terror group that is in control of Syria. What are they going to do? Have conversations and say, well, we'll give you this money as long as you promise not to spend it on bad things? That is a very legitimate question. But obviously, that is a lot of money spent, and that is just the tip of the iceberg. And that is not even talking about the £22 billion spent on this carbon capture stuff, you know, the stuff trees does, capturing carbon emissions, but only they're doing it with machinery of some sort. And coincidentally, it's £22 billion that matches the £22 billion black hole. But nonetheless, we won't get into that. But then we also talked in the last couple of days, in the last couple of videos, about asylum seekers coming to the UK. Now, again, this is not to say that there are not genuine asylum seekers who are genuinely fleeing war, genuinely need help, genuinely need support from another country. Although there are questions over why do they come from France? And some people believe that the vast majority are coming from France and the vast majority are economic migrants. Now, dealing with both of those, just to give you both sides of the picture, which is what I like to do, it is a bit of a myth that the vast majority come to the UK. In fact, the vast majority stay in France or wherever it is. And there is no legal obligation on them to claim asylum in the first safe country that they arrive in. Though it does raise the question of why then move on. As it happens, according to what I read, the vast majority actually stay in France or elsewhere. But that doesn't mean that there are not, as there are, tens of thousands that are coming to the UK. And it leaves big open questions as to why they come here, and are they not really economic migrants? Now, some of the reports, although they might be somewhat biased, I say maybe, I'm not saying they may be somewhat biased depending on who they're written by, that say that the vast majority of those coming to the UK are coming because of family connections. I personally somewhat doubt that, but I personally believe that a lot of them are actually coming here as economic migrants, and I personally believe that obviously I can't pull out a piece of paper to prove this to you, but I personally believe that it is entirely possible that a lot of them that are granted refugee status and asylum in the UK are actually economic migrants, and that they've perhaps been less less truthful on their application. For example, that is entirely possible. No one can tell me that that is not possible, because it certainly is possible. And nonetheless, they come here, and this is measured directly against legal migration, for whom I do not think that we provide enough support, quite frankly. Now, Keir Starmer says we've been a soft touch to people coming here for work and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's the case. Certainly there are businesses that are going to be flouting the rules and all of this sort of stuff. We know that happens. That is a separate problem. The real dealing really should be with the legal routes to come here and what they pay versus those that come here that may well be economic migrants. Now, as I said, I cannot prove to you, and I suggest that the government cannot prove to you conclusively that somebody on an application form is 100% certainly a genuine asylum seeker fleeing war and so on, as against an economic migrant. The reason that I say that is not only because they, to some degree, have to take their word for it on their application, but also they are coming, for the vast majority of them at least, from France, which is a safe place. So yes, they don't have to claim asylum in the first country they arrive at. Yes, the vast majority of them may well stay in France, but they still make that very dangerous journey across the channel in a small boat, which is inherently dangerous, as we've seen from people losing their lives doing that. They still make that journey across to the UK. So one then has to wonder, why would they do that? Why would they leave a safe country to come to the UK unless there was a real benefit of doing so? And unless, of course, the reason that I've read, which I don't necessarily believe, but the reason that I've read is that they're coming for family connections. Maybe they are, but I do suspect that a lot of them are just coming here as an economic migrant. Personal opinion, and I'm entitled to express that. Now, as for what they pay, if they come across the channel in a small boat and they claim asylum upon arrival, I think 98% of them, from the statistics that I read, 98% claim asylum the minute they set foot on British soil or sand. They pay nothing for those applications. In fact, the claiming asylum process is all supported. They pay nothing for the application. They are supported whilst they're making that application. They are supported when it's granted or not, and they're supported if it's not granted until they leave, I understand. But then let's compare that directly, as I mentioned, because a few people have asked the questions about the fees, and one person did make a very good point of, if you access NHS services while you're here, that should be considered a benefit. But it's not free. I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's look, first of all, because many people are interested in this, and this is very much the law. So when I get one or two people in the comments saying, oh, this is all politics, it's not. This is law. I genuinely advise clients on this sort of stuff from time to time. And there are lots of legal aspects to this. And I've been through the process myself with my wife, as I mentioned in previous videos. So let's say you get married to somebody who is not a British citizen, not a British subject. There's a subtle distinction between the two. But let's say you're marrying somebody and you want them to come here, and you want them to come here on a spouse visa. Or they are here as a student. You meet them and you fall in love and you want to get married, and then you want them to stay here on a spouse visa. Whatever it is, whether you're applying for a spouse visa or switching to a spouse visa, and whether that is from inside the UK or outside the UK, these are the fees that apply. So we look at switching or applying for a spouse visa. There may be more than one page than this, but this is the one that I'm going to show you. Fees. How much it costs depends on who you're joining and how you apply. So costs of joining your partner, parent, or child, if you're applying from outside the UK, costs £1,846 just for the application. You get a small discount if you're applying in the UK. I'm not really sure why that is. I suppose they have to do further checks if you're outside of the UK or whatever. Then, now this is the bit that you may find a little bit unfair. Costs for each dependent added to your application. So you pay the £1,846. For each child, you add on another £1,846 if you're outside of the UK, or £1,258 if you're within the UK. Costs for adults who need to be looked after by a relative. If you have temporary, key word here, temporary protected status or protection status, which is permission to stay as a refugee or whatever, whilst you are, I suppose, waiting for your application to be decided or such things, then you can apply for this sort of family visa then, and it costs a few £100s on doing so if you're outside the UK. And for some reason, this is the other way round. It's more expensive if you apply from inside the UK. I don't really know why that is. But otherwise, it costs £3,250 if you're applying from outside the UK. So only if you have a protected status, which is temporary, for example, permission to stay as a refugee, I think that's why you're applying. It's much cheaper. Otherwise, if you're an adult who needs to be looked after by a relative and you're applying here, then it costs £3,250 from outside the UK and £1,250 from inside the UK. If you cannot pay the fee, now this is where a few of these things come into play. If you cannot pay the fee, you may be eligible for a fee waiver in certain situations. For example, you can't afford a place to live or your essential living costs. So that would include those where you've come in on a small boat and you can't afford, or you say you can't afford anything, and therefore you get a fee waiver. But now we come on to the bit that somebody said in the comments, a very interesting, genuine question. I don't criticize the person for making the comment, even though I think they made it in a negative way. I'll brush that aside because I'm a big boy. But it's a genuine, interesting question. They say, if you use NHS services, is that not a health benefit? Well, it would be if it was free, but it's not, because there's a health surcharge, which I neglected to mention yesterday. There was far too much, even though I had notes, or the day before, whenever it was. So a health surcharge. You may also need to pay the health surcharge as part of your application. For each adult 18 or over, it costs £2,587.50 if you're staying for 2.5 years, £3,105 if you're staying for 2 years and 9 months, and £5,175 if you're staying for 5 years. The 5-year bit is sort of relevant in a number of situations I'll come back to in other videos. And then for each child, so let's say all of this, bearing in mind, let's say you're a genuine couple, you've married, you've met, and you want to either come here or switch your visa, etc. You have to pay these health surcharges. For each child, which is under 18, obviously you're 18, you become an adult. For each child, £1,940 if you're staying in the UK for 2.5 years, £2,328 for 2 years, 9 months, and £3,880 if you're staying for 5 years. So this is very much not free. So it's not a benefit in that sense. If you want your decision more quickly, an extra £1,000. You can pay another £1,000 to get your decision more quickly. There's various other things here when you cannot get a visa, but then there's also certain restrictions on this as well. For example, when you cannot get a family visa, so these are additional restrictions. If your family member has a work visa or a student visa, you cannot apply for a family visa if your family member is in the UK temporarily on a work visa or a student visa. They have to leave. Or you have a visitor visa or a visa with 6 months or less, you'll usually need to leave the UK for a family visa if you've got permission to be in the UK as a visitor or your visa is for 6 months or less. However, you may be able to switch to a family visa in the UK if you've got a 6-month family visa as a fiancé or proposed civil partner, or permission to stay in the UK for the outcome of a family court case or divorce. Now, being somewhat cynical here and very, very careful in how I say it, I can very cynically say that it is entirely possible that some people go to the family court, and because they take a lot of time to drag these cases out, cynically, it is entirely possible that some people may bring a case to the family court because you can apply for these visas or switch to a family visa, according to this site here, in the UK, if you have an outcome pending in the family court. Now, obviously, I've had situations before now where I've been somewhat dubious as to the real reason that this case is in the family court. And as a professional, I'm obligated to ask those questions and press and probe. And obviously, I've never been outright told that that's the reason that they're bringing this case, because that would be an abuse of the system and that would be wrong. But cynically, it is entirely possible that some people are coming to the family court simply because they know that they can switch to a family visa if they're awaiting an outcome of a family court case. Make of that what you will. And there's a lot more to that, and that is just a rather cynical observation, I understand. But then we come on to the financial requirements, which I touched briefly on yesterday or the day before. Now, these have changed somewhat over the years and so on. Someone did remind me in the comments that the police reporting bit disappeared, I think in 2022. So thank you for making that comment. One of my viewers very usefully did. So that requirement disappeared, although the police are still notified about certain things and so on. It's just that requirement to trot off, once every time something changes to the police station disappeared. However, financial requirements. If you apply for a family visa as a partner, you and your partner usually need to prove that your combined income is at least £29,000 a year. Contrasting with you've got no money, so it's all free, but if you want to do this as a family visa, as a spouse visa, what I would call legal migration, and some may say playing by the rules and trying to do everything properly, your combined income must be £29,000 a year. This is the minimum income requirement. And there are, of course, some differences if you get disability or carers benefits and so on and so forth. And finally, there are some arguments, such as human rights arguments, that may stop you coming to the UK if you've got a child here. Or otherwise, if you don't meet the financial requirements, the earliest you'll be able to apply for settlement is after 10 years in the UK. Now we compare and contrast that with indefinite leave to remain by what's known as a family reunion. That is where someone has been granted asylum or humanitarian protection here, and you are a member of their family before they were forced to leave that country. If their application is successful, then family members are allowed to come and stay in the UK with the same permission as you. And crucially, there are no fees for applying for a family reunion for eligible family members. Interestingly, under eligibility, it doesn't mention anything to do with financial requirements, income requirements, or etc. It just says your partner and any children must meet the following requirements. Your partner is someone you're in a genuine relationship with. You must be able to prove that you're married or you're in a civil partnership. If you're not married or in a civil partnership, you just prove that you've lived together in a relationship like a marriage or a civil partnership for the last 2 years. Children, if your child is under the age of 18, not married, your child's dependent on you for financial support, etc. They go through all of that, and then, of course, they can apply with no fees whatsoever. It doesn't make clear why there are no fees for that, just that there are, in fact, no fees for it. So the reason that I talk about these things in the way that I do is because these current events and what's going on are very much intertwined with law. This is immigration law. And the government obviously is tweaking and changing those rules all the time, and it affects everybody. But with the vast scale of what's going on here, for example, if we take the ambitious plan of building 1.5 million houses all across the country, and what they're now referring to as grey land, as opposed to green belt, or grey belt versus green belt, this is sort of a subtle way of making you think, well, it's probably okay then. If it's just a car park or it's just a bit of a park that's not really used anymore, then suddenly they might think that that's okay. But 1.5 million houses across the country. Now let's look at some real numbers. Now people might criticize Nigel Farage for throwing numbers out like this, but I've done the maths myself. Let's take their ambitious statistic of doing 1.5 million houses over this parliament of 5 years. Because I don't give them 10 years. I mean, let me know in the comments if you think they'll get another round in. I don't think they'll be able to go for another term after this. I think it will be the biggest wipeout in history, quite frankly. And that's not because I'm an avid conservative or whatever. I don't support what the last 14 years worth of government has done either, for that matter, for those that keep criticizing me for it. I don't. But let's take this 1.5 million houses that they plan to build over this 5 years. You can do the maths yourself. That would be 822 houses every single day, which, if they work around the clock, is one house every 2 minutes. So Nigel Farage is correct. One house every 2 minutes. It takes me longer to make a cup of coffee. So that's not going to happen. So however ambitious they think this is, it's not going to happen. But what they will do is they will literally bulldoze across areas of, well, your estates. So little areas that you might think there's a little bit of green land that you enjoy walking across, walking your dog or just walking around for a while. Make sure you go to the planning portal and you can set up an alert to ping you if there's a planning application in that area. And it will tell you this neighbor or that neighbor is planning to put another bedroom on the top of their house or whatever. Now, if all of you do that and you all get pinged with these houses are popping up everywhere, do let me know, and I'll talk about those as well, because I think this is going to affect every village, every city across the country. They are literally going to bulldoze over and make this a building graveyard of grey buildings all over the country. And not only that, looking at the numbers, if we have millions of migrants coming to the UK, again, with the caveat that some genuinely need the help, I am not speaking out against those. This is not to be taken as a criticism or inciting hatred or anything else. There are people in genuine need. This is not against them. This is purely a statistical, numerical challenge here. If there are millions of people coming here who need support because they have no money and they need somewhere to live because they're homeless, and there's a couple of million houses or 1.5 million houses they want to build, it doesn't take much of a leap of imagination as to where they are going to have to live. And Angela Rayner refused to answer the question, flip-flopping from there's a housing crisis to there's plenty of housing to there's plenty of housing but not enough for those that really need it. So was she outright saying that we need to build these houses for migrants? So that translates into, this is not me being a conspiracy theorist or anything else. I'm literally taking their word for it, the statistics for it, the number of people coming in and what they have said. It is entirely likely, if not probable, that these migrants are going to live in houses built in a neighborhood near you. That is not eccentric to say. It's not ridiculous to say, because it's based off what they are saying. And so the reason that I talk about these things in this way is because this law, these decisions, all of this, they're all intertwined. They all very much have an impact on you. And if I were to explain these in a purely boring, technical, legal sense, as I would to a law student, you would not be interested. You would not find it interesting. You may not follow it with respect, because it would be much more technical if it was just that, rather than laying it out as I like to do. And I think there's no need for me to speak in so-called legalese and technical jargon rubbish. In fact, even the courts suggest that we avoid legal technical jargon and say things as they are. Simple example, what has always been referred to in court as a final resolution of the issues in a case, in the matter of the case. All that means is you get a judgment, you get a decision. Someone wins and someone loses. That is the final resolution. It's been decided, it's been adjudicated upon, and even then it can go to appeal, but we digress. So all of these things very much do affect you. Now let's talk about how they might affect big corporates and things like that. Employer national insurance. A lot of people think and have commented against previous videos that they don't care about big companies, they don't care about corporates, that's up to them, let them pay the money, they say. But that will affect people, not only because it's going to affect prices, and prices they've already said prices are going to go up. Currys has just yesterday, I think I read, Currys has said we're going to increase prices because we can't swallow all these costs. Employers will lower wages to cover those costs as well over time. And by lower, I mean they won't increase them. But also, this does affect you, because if the big corporate's bottom line is affected, this is obviously going to affect pensions, because many pensions and investments are tied to those big companies, whether you manage them or not. You may not even, with respect, you may not even realize that your pension may be tied to these big companies. Many pensions, are based on US companies as opposed to UK companies. But by the by, a lot of pensions are tied to UK companies and their performance. So whether or not you're a farmer, whether you're a business owner, whether you've got children in private school, which is a whole other issue, they still haven't, from what I read yesterday, they refuse to do this full impact assessment because I think they're afraid of what it will show as to just how devastating this is going to be, with children being cut halfway through their GCSE years. But even if you don't have children in private school, and even if you don't have a family member trying to come here on a spouse visa and all that sort of stuff, or you're not trying to buy a house, and if none of that applies to you and you still think these events don't apply to you, then they very much do, because wherever you live, it may affect your local area, and wherever your pension is, it may affect that. Whatever your pension money is, it may well affect that. There was subtle rumors the other day about them being means tested, and that the whole thing is now under threat. And talk about doctor's appointments. 10 years ago, you could ring up and easily get a doctor's appointment. Now you're lucky to get one on the same day. You're lucky if they answer the phone. And I recently know someone that couldn't get an appointment on the phone, so they rang 111 and they were told that they were going to call back and didn't. They were desperately ill, and they just didn't call back. quite clearly, they didn't have the capacity to call back. So all of these things very much do affect everybody. And on another note, and this is a bit of a general caveat here, when I tell you about these things, it's not necessarily that I am for or against one point, or even for or against an individual that I speak about. Yesterday, I spoke of Tommy Robinson. He's been ordered to pay £50,000 on account, with the remaining to be assessed. Somebody left a message. Now, again, I don't criticize unduly here, but somebody left a message to say they are unsubscribing from me because they didn't like the fact that Tommy Robinson had to pay these costs, and they thought that I'm being against Tommy Robinson because I'm telling you about it, and that he's being questioned by police and so on. I'll link yesterday's video if you missed it. But I didn't say that I support him or I don't support him. In fact, it doesn't matter. Many of you probably don't know whether I support him or not. Even when I had him on the channel and the video got banned, well, flagged and limited at least, even when I had him on the channel, I didn't say whether I support him or not. I'm sure he doesn't care whether I support him or not. It's all a case of free and open discussion. And so I had him on the channel to let him have his say. There's enough people saying what they like about him. I brought him on the channel so that he had an opportunity to say what he wanted to say. That's sort of what an advocate does. You will find me very often arguing for a point of view, regardless whether I agree with it or not. And that's regardless of being personally and professionally instructed or not. Obviously, if you're professionally instructed on a case, you argue for that point of view. It doesn't matter you agree with the point of view or not. And likewise, if I'm giving you a point of view on here, such as, in my opinion, the number of migrants coming to this country is going to have a devastating impact across the country, that is not me saying that all of these migrants are a bad thing, and it's not me saying that we shouldn't help them, and it's not me saying that they don't need help and it's not genuine and so on. It's just another perspective. And you can hold that opinion regardless of being adverse to the people against whom you're making that opinion, if that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if that did come across properly, because I don't script my videos, I never have, and I hope that that comes across properly. But when I give you these views and these points of view, it is not necessarily that I am for or against one side. I am laying it out because too many people will not say what they really think. They will not say what's really going on. They're afraid to say certain things. They're afraid to speak out against certain things. They're afraid, for example, to speak out against religious extremism and things like that. Now, I have friends of many different faiths, so I have nothing against any other faith or another, but I am against extremism, whatever faith that comes from. And so I will speak out against that. And so I think people are afraid of speaking out against it for fear of being labeled racist in general across the board, which obviously is unfair and not true. In fact, even when I don't really give you opinions, or whether I give you an opinion or not, I've had complaints to my regulator. None of them have been upheld, I'm pleased to say. Each of them have had a form of words that I'm entitled to my opinions and express my opinions under my Article 10 rights. Obviously, I wouldn't be discriminatory and racist and all those kind of things. And speaking out against something is none of those things. Somebody even complained to my regulator when I told you about the changes in the highway code that was to put pedestrians and cyclists above drivers in the hierarchy, which I agree with, but I also think it's going to cause chaos, which is what I said in the original video. And it doesn't work. I said I don't think it will work. And that was a year, 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago now. And it doesn't work. From my personal experience, I can now say it doesn't work. How do I know? Because I've been the pedestrian. I've tested this. I've been standing at the side of the road and I've gone to cross. I've put one foot in the road as though I'm about to cross, and the driver's just pulled out in front of me, looked at me as if to say, don't you dare cross the road. And they've pulled out in front of me. Now, according to the highway code update, I had priority because I looked like I was about to cross the road. And so if you're a driver turning into or out of a road across which it appears that a pedestrian is about to cross or is in the process of crossing, the driver should stop and give priority. Well, guess what? 9 times out of 10, they don't. Once or twice, because I've tested this a lot over the last couple of years, because I wanted to be able to come back to you to tell you whether this works or not. It doesn't work. For the vast majority, it doesn't work. I said in that video it would be chaos. The point of all this is someone complained to my regulator saying that they didn't like my opinion because I said it was going to be chaos, these new changes to the highway code. That's just my opinion. And as it turns out, I was right, because it is chaos. It doesn't work. Had I crossed, there'd have been this whole possibly collision. Who knows? But if I assumed that I would get priority and just walk out, there'll be this confrontation at the very least. So with that, I hope you found this somewhat useful, somewhat entertaining. And of course, it is most certainly about the law, but it incorporates news and current events. So with that, I hope you enjoy this frank approach. If you do, please do like the video and subscribe. I'm aiming for 1 million subscribers. That is very much a goal of mine. So at least in some sense, in my heart, I feel that I've helped 1 million people. So with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for dropping me off, love.
No worries. I'll see you at 5.
Yeah, cool. Oh, it's my wet wife.
Oh, the infamous wet wife.
Hang on, I'll introduce you. Brett.
Oh, hi, Hubby.
So I've been to introduce you to Ellie.
Oh my God, Ellie. Hi, so nice to meet you. I've heard so much about you.
You too. It's nice to put a face to the name.
By the way, where's my proper good morning?
Oh.
What are you doing?
What?
You just kissed her.
Yeah.
Okay, why did you kiss her?
Because she's my work wife.
Are you serious?
So I don't understand. What do you mean?
I'm your wife?
So far towards this net zero, then we're not thinking about the environmental impact for the creatures and the animals and the people that live in these areas that we need the energy.
In these renewable energy projects, they're getting more and more sophisticated and better at integrations with the environment. So they're getting safer. There's less and less animal issues with these renewable energy projects because the technology is improving. For instance, in different locations around the world, the wind turbines will stop moving when there is sensitivity to wind migration bird migration running through the wind farms. So the technology is improving. And what else is important is it's clean energy.
Yeah, yes, but do the ones in the UK do that?
Over time,
they don't, do they?
These wind farms are getting improved over time. The technology is improving. And
yeah, but
what else is important is that this is clean energy. This isn't burning fossil fuels, and this isn't creating more pollution. This is reducing pollution.
Well, you see, you look at that, but let's be honest. The wind turbine is made of some sort of steel, I presume. We've shut down a lot of our steelworks. So you're going to import the wind turbine. That is a carbon footprint right there, right? You put the wind turbine up. Its lifespan, I hear, is about 15 years. So you're going to have to do it again.
The recyclability of wind turbines, as well as other renewable energy production units, are also coming into play at the moment, where we're seeing a lot more recyclability of these production sites, which is great, because then we're not having to constantly import and create new structures over and over again. We can just simply recycle what we have.
Yeah, but I just think it's a bit disingenuous when everyone says how great it is and then they forget the massive carbon footprint that it's left to actually create the thing in the first place. Isaac, really good to talk to you. That is energy intelligence analyst Isaac Kenyon. 48 minutes after 3 o'clock, experts have warned that Keir Starmer's house building bonanza will barely keep up with immigration. More on that next. I'm Nana Ukwe. This is GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Fabio, thank you for coming in. It's great to see you.
Nice to meet you.
So you were born near Rome?
Yeah, in a very small town. It's called Serrone, about an hour south of Rome. Yeah, on the hillside.
Was it a place of excellent cuisine?
It is indeed a place of excellent cuisine and red wines. In fact, it's the only DOCG red wine of the region. Yeah.
Most of your career, I mean, this may seem self-evident, you've cooked Italian. I'm thinking that's quite a challenge to cook Italian in Malaysia, to cook Italian in Bermuda or Turkey. Was that a challenge?
It was, yeah, but I like challenges, so that's one of the reasons why I started to travel, because of my job. For example, in Malaysia, I've been sent there to twist a grill restaurant into an Italian restaurant inside a five-star hotel. And I was doing the chef training for the local chefs. And then I build the menus, I train the chefs, and then I eventually go back.
In Italian food, is there lots of innovation?
I would say in the past 10 years, yes. It used to be a very traditional cuisine, but in the past 10, 15 years, Italian chefs, they are a bit more open-minded, I would say.
Give us some examples of your innovation.
Well, hide and seek is very well around the innovation. In that bar is a bar and kitchen where we have a shared plate concept, where we try to take our guests in a culinary journey, starting from a classic dish and then reinventing to a modern twist. Usually I like to twist the style of cuisine between different countries, different continents.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News. Breaking news from earlier this afternoon. 609 migrants have arrived in the UK yesterday after crossing the English Channel in 9 small boats. At the same time, the government have been warned that their plans to build 1.5 million new homes risks being wiped out by high levels of migration. Of course it would do. Joining me now is the Research Director, Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates. Rob Bates, thank you and welcome. Rob, look, we've got hundreds of migrants arriving again, and yet we're told that they're going to be building houses, 1.5 million houses. I am concerned that the UK simply doesn't have the capacity to house all these people.
Well, we don't, and obviously some of the numbers that have been doing the rounds suggesting that Labour are going to be able to build 1.5 million houses over the course of the next Parliament. That remains to be seen as to whether they're actually able to accomplish that. Obviously, lots of governments have tried that previously, but then there's also the element that net migration is forecast to be around about 1.5 million over the course of this Parliament. So there's, of course, a clear numerical discrepancy there between the number of houses that are being built and the number of people that are coming in. And, of course, that net migration figure is a woeful underestimate of what the figures will actually be. It's probably going to be far more likely 2.5 million. I think the ONS, which produced the 1.5 figure, has never correctly forecast the number of people that would be coming into the country. But there's a bigger point here, and that is that the Labour Party simply don't understand the pressures that migration is putting on British services, British housing, dentistry and GPs and things like that. They simply won't countenance it. We had Angela Rayner looking like a fool, frankly, on Sunday talking to Trevor Phillips about the issue. And then we had Matthew Pennycook, the housing minister, earlier this week, saying that concerns that house building programmes would be wiped out by mass migration was simply scaremongering. So these are people that simply won't countenance that there is a link between mass migration and the huge pressures that the British public are facing.
Yeah, well, listen, we've run out of time already. I'm going to talk to you. I wanted to have a long conversation about this, but thank you very much to you. Right, well, Labour Minister for Housing and Planning, Matthew Pennycook, has denied that the majority of new homes will be sold to foreigners. Have a listen.
He knows, as well as I do, that the majority of homes that developers sell in this country are to British nationals, that most parts of the country have local allocation rules in place and local residency requirements that means that non-British nationals can't access housing, that only those who are eligible for no recourse to public funds could do so. He knows those rules. He's scaremongering. It's beneath him.
Well, listen, we will get Rob Bates back on and have a chat with him more later on. But Britain is now on recession watch as official figures join the economy shrank for the second month in a row. Stay with me. I'm Nana Acquare. This is GB News. We are Britain's news channel. Now, though, let's get an update with your weather with Alex Deakin.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a change on the way. For many of us, something a bit brighter tomorrow. We'll finally see a bit of blue sky. By Sunday, it'll be grey again, but it will, at least by then, be a little bit milder. Grey and chilly for most today. A bit of drizzle here and there. It's a bit of a messy weather picture, but this line of rain tracking south will introduce clearer skies behind it. And that will be spreading its way right across the south by tomorrow. But certainly tonight, it'll stay cloudy in the south. That keeps the temperatures up with the clearer skies. Certainly in eastern Scotland, we will see some frost here. But we should also see some sunshine across Scotland, northern England, North Wales, also something a bit brighter tomorrow compared to the gloom of recent days. There's still going to be some showers coming into northern Scotland, a bit of snow on the tops of the Scottish mountains too. Rain showers filtering at times into the north of Northern Ireland and coming down through the Irish Sea into North Wales. But the cloud edging away. It'll still be pretty drab early doors over East Anglia and the southeast, but even here, by the time we get to lunchtime, that cloud should be breaking up to reveal some sunshine. We haven't seen much of that this week across the south. So many places seeing sunny spells, still a few showers in North Wales, but the showers tending to fade across Scotland, but only to allow a bit more in the way of rain and drizzle to come in through the afternoon here, and the breeze also starting to pick up. Temperature-wise, 6s and 7s as they have been for much of the week, but of course a bit of sunshine will make something of a difference. By Sunday, well, the sun in short supply again. We're covered in cloud, but milder air is in place. Rain and drizzle over western hills and around the coast, turning very wet across northwest Scotland by the end of Sunday. Many areas just dry and cloudy on Sunday, but the temperatures double figures at least. In fact, many places 11 or 12 degrees Celsius. Do need to watch that rain in the northwest, could really build up on Sunday and into Monday as well.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, South Yorkshire, and queues on the northbound A1M at the moment around the M18 turn off junction 35. An obstruction there means queues building and is partially blocked. Now there's a breakdown causing queues on the westbound M62 from Eccles through towards Birchwood. That's junction 12 to 11. A lane shut there for that breakdown, causing delays. The A1 southbound, just away from the Honeypot Lane Industrial Estate turn off in Closterworth in Lincolnshire, down towards the North Whittam turn-off. Now that's blocked and the big queues forming at the scene of a vehicle fire there. Berkshire westbound M4, 8 and 9 Maidenhead through towards Woking and Bracknell at 10. Lane 1's out, a collision causing queues, and 2 lanes out in queues anti-clock on the M25 away from Brentwood 28 towards junction 27.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Imagine getting a call to tell you that you've won £50,000.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome. It's 4 o'clock. This is Martin Daubney's show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. I'm Nana Aquir, covering for Martin today. So, coming up, Britain is on recession watch as official figures show the economy shrank for the second month in a row in October. And that was before Rachel Reeves' business-bashing budget. How much worse could things get? Tories have warned that Sir Keir Starmer's house-building bonanza will barely keep up with immigration today, even if he hits his target for 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. Ed Miliband has pledged to bring in the most ambitious reforms to the country's energy systems in a generation, as he presses ahead with plans to accelerate the development of onshore wind farms in England. But will England's green and pleasant lands be ruined by Ed forever? Could Ed's big day also be overshadowed by an ongoing row between himself and Cabinet colleague Wes Streeting over his failure to back military action in Syria against Bashar al-Assad in 2013? And could Prince Andrew's choice of friends get any worse? He's accused of having a close personal relationship with a suspected Chinese spy who is now banned from Britain. Apparently, he even attended the Duke's birthday bash. That really takes the biscuit. Or the cake. Well, as ever, send me your thoughts, post your comments, gbnews.com/your say. But now, let's get your latest news headlines with Will Hollis.
Thank you, Nana. Your top stories at 4 o'clock. First up, some breaking news. A wicked predator who was caught on CCTV raping and killing an NHS worker on a park bench has been jailed for life. Mohammed Lido attacked mother of three, Natalie Shotter, while she was passed out in Southall Park, West London, after going on a night out. Following an Old Bailey trial, Lido was found guilty of her rape and manslaughter. And today, Judge Richard Marks KC sentenced Lido to life with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months. Speaking after the sentencing, Ms Shotter's family said they are thrilled with the length.
She was an incredible girl, beautiful girl, very, very kind, generous, patient, talented, very funny, fabulous singer and actress. And the most wonderful mum, an amazing daughter and sister to Harry.
A coroner has concluded that a former British paratrooper was unlawfully killed in Ukraine. Daniel Burke died from multiple gunshot wounds in September last year. At the inquest today, the coroner said Daniel was unlawfully killed by someone who purported to be his friend. He died with bravery and valour, but was killed by cowardice and dishonour. Daniel from South Manchester went to Ukraine 2 years ago to support their fight against Russia's invading forces. The inquest was told Mr. Burke had previously travelled to Syria to fight against the so-called Islamic State after being heavily affected by events in Manchester in May 2017, when 22 people died in the Manchester Arena bombing. In other news, the UK economy shrank for the second month in a row in October as concerns about the budget continue to weigh on confidence. The Office for National Statistics said output fell 0.1%, following the 0.1% decline recorded for the previous month. The figures showed zero growth in the powerhouse services sector, with manufacturing and construction declining at a pace of 0.6% and 0.4% relatively. The ONS says activity had stalled or declined, with pubs, restaurants and retail among sectors reporting weak months. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said she was disappointed by the data.
But it's not possible to turn around more than a decade of poor economic growth and stagnant living standards in just a few months. But you'll see from the plans we've been announcing, whether that is the energy reforms we've published today, the reforms to build 1.5 million homes that we published yesterday, the pensions reforms, the creation of a national wealth fund, this government are getting on with the job in improving economic growth and driving up living standards.
Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride says the falling growth shows the stark impact of the Chancellor's decisions and continually talking down the economy.
Well, it's not good. These are stark figures. This is the second consecutive month in which the economy has contracted. Now, bear in mind that the government actually inherited the fastest growing economy in the G7 from the last Conservative government. And what this shows is that this government's constant talking down of the UK economy is coming through in these numbers. Now, of course, we've had a budget. We're going to be seeing higher taxes, higher inflation, higher interest rates, downward pressure on wages and higher unemployment. And so it's no surprise that businesses right up and down the country are now sounding the alarm.
Bit of royal news now. According to reports, an alleged Chinese spy suspected of having links to Prince Andrew has been banned from entering the UK on national security grounds. The man, known only as H6, was found to be a close confidant of the Prince and was reportedly invited to the Duke's birthday celebrations. The Home Office has accused the individual of covert and deceptive activity, acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. Buckingham Palace has declined to comment at this time. 2 men were arrested after a Christmas fairground ride crashed to the ground in Birmingham city centre. The men, aged 55 and 21, were arrested at the scene yesterday evening on suspicion of perverting the course of justice and obstructing officers. They remain in custody. 2 women were taken to hospital after the City Star Flyer ride failed and crashed, while another 11 patients were assessed by paramedics and discharged at the scene. And your final one for now. Emmanuel Macron has named centrist veteran Francois Bayrou as France's new Prime Minister, according to a statement from his office. Bayrou replaces Michel Barnier, who resigned last week after far-right and leftist lawmakers voted to topple the government, plunging France into its second major political crisis in 6 months. Bayrou is seen by Macron's entourage as a potential consensus candidate, and his task will be to avoid the fate of his predecessor. Macron is halfway through his second term as president, and Bayrou will be his 4th prime minister this year. Those are your latest stories at just gone 4 o'clock. We'll have a few more for you a little bit later.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, stand by, prepare yourselves. The UK is on recession watch. Now, the economy is shrinking and it's the second month in a row the country has seen negative growth. Chancellor Rachel Reeves is disappointed.
But it's not possible to turn around more than a decade of poor economic growth and stagnant living standards in just a few months. But you'll see from the plans we've been announcing, whether that is the energy reforms we've published today, the reforms to build 1.5 million homes that we published yesterday, the pensions reforms, the creation of a national wealth fund, this government are getting on with the job in improving economic growth and driving up living standards.
Yes, but let's not forget that she warned us about this 3 years ago. Is she a hypocrite?
Despite all of their election promises to cut national insurance contributions, they're actually raising them against the strong advice of business and trades unions. The Conservative government's actions will make each new recruit more expensive and increase the costs to business. The decision to saddle employers and workers with the jobs tax takes money out of people's pockets when our economic recovery is not yet established or secure, and only adds to the pressure on businesses.
So she does know the effect of her policies. Well, joining me now is GB News political editor Christopher Hope. I can't get enough of playing that. I know it's 3 years ago and everything, but to me...
It shows how it's easier in opposition than in government, maybe, Nana.
Or maybe she was just reading a script that she didn't understand, and now she's... I don't know.
I think she understood it. I think it's just often easier when, when you're not in power. Just look at Reform UK. They're saying all sorts of things to win votes at the moment, some of which you can't actually do in government, probably.
Well, we shall see if they get into power in a few years' time. But look, Rachel Reeves, nothing is really landing well on any part of her budget. I'm looking to find one thing that is working. Is there anything?
From the budget, that's a curveball.
Oh, sorry, Christopher.
I think the budget hasn't spooked the market, so on the basic level it succeeded where Liz Truss failed. I think the scale of changes is as dramatic as what Liz Truss did, I think, with state intervention, big tax increases, the other way around from tax cutting to tax increasing. It hasn't really alarmed the market in the same way. I think it's because she put a lot of effort into smoothing over the worries. So a 10-week wait before as the OBR looked at it, and then she went to Washington and obviously briefed the international IMF, the International Monetary Fund, about it. I think she did all the homework to make it work. But the gamble she's taking, I think, and is as great as Liz Truss took. Liz Truss was in a big rush. She had two years left for the election. The Queen had just died. She'd lost a bit of momentum in her government as we all mourned the death of the late monarch. And I think she was in a rush, and that did for her, really. I think with Rachel Reeves, same gamble, but the markets aren't yet spooked. But whether this comes to work or not, listen, the economy contracted by 0.1% in September. 0.1% in October. The context of that is we were worrying all for those 2 months, what will the Rachel Reeves do? This big budget at the end of October really dampened confidence. I think in that sense, Mel Stride, who's her Tory shadow, was right when he says it shows a stark impact of continually talking the economy down. Fast forward to December, number 10 today is pointing to consumer confidence being up 3 points. They're saying, look at it's almost the vibes. People feel a bit better off. We know with the budget's now...
It's Christmas. People are buying more things. That's normal.
Maybe, but the budget's now 6 weeks away and we're moving towards a happier period. They will hope that's true because the economy grew by 0.1% in the third quarter. If it falls in the fourth quarter and falls in the first 3 months of next year, we are in a recession, and that won't be a question mark on the screen.
Yeah, you see, this is the thing. I think a lot of the things, as you said, it does feel like a gamble, a slower gamble. But unfortunately, I'm concerned that even though she's saying that she's had it to deal with what's happened before, so kind of give her a chance, I can't see any of the things, any positivity in any of them. For example, inheritance tax on farmers. That doesn't seem like a very wise proposition.
Well, I think it was an issue that the Tories looked at in the past. You have got rich landowners who aren't farmers buying land to avoid inheritance tax. We understand, and so they're trying to target them. It may be a bit of a blunt instrument, a blunderbuss, if you like, and it may be they fiddle with the rules, so they lift the threshold to £5 million from £1 million estates. And the one idea the Lib Dems are pushing forward I quite like, as in terms of making sense to me as a layman, is to apply a balance sheet test. So anyone wanting to take advantage of these reliefs must prove they are a trading business and buying and selling produce, being a farmer essentially, rather than being a landowner squatting on land to avoid inheritance tax. Yeah. That makes more sense. I think what they've done here is so kind of broad brush, really. Yeah. I think the problem they've got is that they are hitting so many people, and we're seeing the anger last week, more next week, and it'll go on into New Year. It doesn't come in, by the way, until April 2026, don't forget. There's another big budget next November. I wonder if she might tweak it all then.
I don't know whether I don't feel that they're listening to anything. Christopher Hope, thank you very much. Right, let's bring in the CEO of the Nighttime Industries Association, Michael Kill. Michael, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
OK, so Rachel Reeves' budget, obviously for you, it would be the NI for, obviously, employers. And, of course, you've got business rates and then you've got the minimum wage. All those three are one big hit in this budget. How is it affecting the industry that you serve?
Well, I think we've got to set the scene. I mean, we're already sat at about 30 to 40% as an increase in operating costs since pre-pandemic. What we are going to see with this budget come April is potentially a 30 to 100k increase in operating costs over and above that, something that everyone is very fearful of. As you can appreciate, the business confidence is heavily down. and we're worried about the future. A lot of this golden quarter should be about building cash reserves to get through the slower period in Q1. We're now looking at getting through the slower period and trying to make up that cash shortcoming come April, moving into the Q2 next year. So many of these businesses are very worried about their future.
Yeah, but Rachel's saying that, you know, kind of give her a bit more time. They inherited, you know, something really terrible, and therefore... But I'm just looking at it saying, well, just looking at it right now, it doesn't look like it's going in the right direction. If it were me, I'd be changing course, but she's double downing on this. Do you think there's any prospect that the ideas and the way they're, you know, the budget will actually show something positive in the end? She's saying wait and see.
Well, the reality is many of these businesses haven't got the time to wait and see. And I think this is where there has been a certain level of ignorance or naivety. I mean, the hospitality sector has been talking about the fragility of the sector for many, many years now, off the back of the pandemic into the cost of operating crisis. We obviously highlighted people having less disposable income. There's a lot of talk about putting money back in people's pockets, but it's very clear that that's just about covering the base cost of daily living costs. So the reality is long term is not good enough. Short term is where we have the issue, and this is what needs to be dealt with. And I think this constant conversation about blame and long-term strategy is just not cutting it with the sector that needs some immediate support and needs that financial headroom to safeguard many of predominantly the small medium enterprise businesses and culture to get through over the next 12 months. You know, that imminent period is very challenging.
Is there anything to support you, though, within this budget that is positive?
Well, I mean, we've seen this cycle of we give business rates relief. 75% was given last time under a different regime. This time we've reduced that down to 40%. But in both cases, what we've seen is taxation added on. So all we're doing is giving in one hand and taking away with the other. You know, whether we talk about alcohol duty and the 1p saving on a pint, when you look at the net value of that, that's negative 3.4% in terms of your GP or your margin. So all of this is somewhat of smoke and mirrors and extremely frustrating for people who are just trying to run true, honest businesses and sustain their position after almost 5 years of an extremely challenging operating environment.
Yeah, well, listen, it's really good to talk to you, Michael. Thank you very much. That's Michael Gill. He's the CEO of the Night Times Industry Association. We can now speak to former Labour advisor Kevin Meagher. Kevin, look, a lot of people are not happy with a lot of the stuff that is in Rachel Reeves' budget. She herself has pointed out what would happen if she raised NI on employers, but she's gone ahead and done it anyway. Even winter fuel allowance, they did research saying it wasn't in opposition, saying 4,000 would potentially die, but they've gone ahead and done it anyway. And then they've done some stuff that nobody would even know or expect them to do. So where is the growth going to come from her budget?
Well, I think Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, they're a bit like a couple that have gone out for a night and they come back home and their teenagers have had a house party and absolutely trashed the place. That's what they're dealing with. I mean, they're dealing with wallpaper coming off the walls, the drinks cabinet raided, and some teenager puking up in the koi carp pond. I mean, that's, you know, everything that could go wrong in the economy has kind of gone wrong. And we've got a very difficult international picture as well. For example, in Germany, the engine of European growth and the European economy, you know, the German central bank has reduced the 2025 growth rate for the German economy this week from 1.1% to 0.2%. So it's a very difficult international climate. We're not quite sure what President Trump will do with tariffs as well. That may provoke a trade war, as Chris was saying a minute ago, and make things worse as well. So it's difficult internationally and difficult nationally. And so Rachel Reeves has done some pretty tough and difficult things to try and stabilise the public finances. She's inherited a very large spending deficit, a £22 billion black hole from the previous government. That's needed to be plugged, and it's required some pretty difficult medicine. Now, she said herself already that, you know, she would not do this budget again because, you know, politicians don't like making unpopular decisions. And you're right. I mean, there are measures in this budget that have made her very unpopular with certain groups. We've just heard from the businessman just before me. You know, there's a lot of people that want to see growth and growth in the economy and the cost of living crisis that we've put up with for so many years now resolved, and people have money in their pockets and the economy go through a stable period again. And that's what she's trying to get to. It's just a very, very difficult, rocky road to get there.
Well, if we carry on with your analogy of, you've come into the party and you come and there's been a load of teenagers, they've been sick on the wall, or sick on the floor. People might argue that this is now she's coming in and smearing the sicko over the walls, if you see what I mean. Because the policies that she's put in place don't do what she said they were meant to do. So, for example, if you want to grow the economy, why would you tax employers? It doesn't make any sense. That's all it is. I get it that she inherited a bad situation, but it does feel like they're making matters worse.
Well, they've got to sort the public finances out, because if they're not sorted out, then we're going to have even deeper problems than we've got now. I mean, inside the budget that she delivered a few weeks ago was a forecast from the Office of Budget Responsibility, which is the independent experts that validate the figures and the decisions that the Chancellor makes. Now, I mean, it's a difficult growth figure for 2024. They've predicted it at 1.1%. We've had a second monthly contraction, so it may be that is over generous. But more optimistically, for 2025, they're talking about 2% growth, and then in 2026, 1.8% growth. Now, these are not earth-shattering figures, but compared to where we've been probably for the last year or so, there's cause for optimism, especially as inflation is going to come back to trend in 2026 as well. So the medium term looks a lot better than the immediate short term, and the economics are difficult, and the politics are very, very difficult as well, and the government is very much alive to that. But I mean, a lot of the things it's trying to do are about trying to put us in that zone where we've got sustainable growth year after year. Planning reforms. Now, these things in and of themselves sound like, on the never, but they will have a big effect. The house building targets that we saw the other day, they'll all start to sort of come together. But
the house building targets, hold on. House building targets without properly tackling migration mean nothing. You're just at net zero, literally.
Absolutely.
You're at zero.
The difficulty that this government's got, more than any that I can think of in probably the last 30, 40 years, is that all the difficult policy decisions are interrelated. You're absolutely right. We've got a 1.5 million house building target. Great, fine. That's a bit higher than the previous government. They're going to change the planning laws, make it easy to get these houses built. But you're right. If we soar away immigration, that's going to soak up a lot of those numbers. So that's got to be tackled as well. So all of these very difficult public policy issues are all interconnected in a way that I can't imagine really in recent decades they have been. So if any part of this chain doesn't work, then the overall thing isn't going to work. And I think the government is very, very alive to that.
All right, Kevin, but I think they've always been interconnected, even as time immemorial began, and we, as the general public, know this. And I'm just wondering whether the government are thinking straight, because a lot of those businesses will be gone and they won't have the time, which is what Michael was saying, to wait for the success of this so-called budget. Kevin Meagher, thank you very much. He's a former Labour advisor. Right, well, 22 minutes after 4 o'clock. Coming up, Prince Andrew has once again come under fire for his choice of friends, as one is allegedly outed as a Chinese spy. I'm Nana Akwe. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? And are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. Mm-hmm. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally, we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to sort of, to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, you know, same with Anne Boleyn, you know, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who is Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage. Because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious, but there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Do you like them? I feel a bit like Michelle Dewberry, to be honest with you. These are my new glasses. But actually, they're reading glasses, so I can't see a thing, so I have to take them off. But welcome back. This is GB News, 26 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Aquia. I'm in for Martin Daubney. Now, honestly, he really doesn't know how to pick friends, and you can guess who this is, because it's more bad news for Prince Andrew, as a new report claims that one of his close confidants is a suspected Chinese spy. You literally couldn't make this up. According to a secret hearing, the alleged spy supported Prince Andrew during recent scandals and was invited to his birthday party in 2020. Maybe it's because these sort of people are the only ones that will dare hang out with him, because he seems to be making so many errors. Well, I'm now joined by Professor Anthony Glees, a security expert from the University of Buckingham. Thank you very much for joining me, Anthony. Look, I just don't get it. How can Prince Andrew manage to surround himself with such controversial people? He's a royal. He was a working royal at the time. Surely the people around him would have checked these people out.
Well, I'm afraid the answer is clearly not. I mean, frankly, I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I never thought that somebody like myself would come onto a programme like yours and say the 8th in line to the throne of the United Kingdom is a national security threat. But that's what this shows. Prince Andrew has been a national security threat. And if you follow the documents carefully, you'll see that by 2020, when the Duke celebrated his 60th birthday, Agent H6 was already part of his inner circle. He was only uncovered the following year, and he was uncovered the following year in a way by a fluke. So he wasn't screened. Nobody said to Prince Andrew, look, this chap is connected to Chinese intelligence. You may say it should be blindingly obvious to anybody that somebody from China would have an intelligence link. But the prince could claim MI5 hadn't alerted him. And that's a serious intelligence failure on our part here in the United Kingdom. But the truth is that certainly from 2020 to 2021, when Agent 86 was caught by the border control and all this stuff was downloaded from his phone, he was, as I say, part of Prince Andrew's inner circle. And that is absolutely horrifying. What's more, the documents show that the close advisor to the prince, somebody called Dominic Hampshire, wrote to H6 and said to him, we've been following your guidance throughout, and that has allowed people to get access to the Duke of York, bypassing those people who might not have been keen on this happening. That is an extraordinary revelation. So they were trying to outwit the people who were there to try and protect him. And this is a terrible day for our national security.
Well, it's a terrible day, and on this, for Prince Andrew, I mean, this has got to be the last straw, really. I actually feel a little bit sorry for him, because I think I don't know what's going on with him. But Anthony, really good to talk to you. That's Anthony Glees. He's a security expert at the University of Buckingham. Well, of course, it is, of course, coming up to Christmas, isn't it? I haven't put my tree up at all yet. I have 2 children, poor things. But during Advent, as we count down to Christmas Day, we are hearing from church ministers across the country, and every day we have a special message for you to celebrate this festive season. Have a listen.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 13.
Hi, I'm Tom Finnemore. At the heart of the Christmas story, there's a moment that's often overlooked. The moment when the angelic host appear to the shepherds. The skies light up with the chorus of angels declaring the birth of the Saviour. Now, this might sound like a beautiful, peaceful scene, but there's something radically surprising about it. You see, shepherds in that time were often poor, uneducated, and considered lowly. Yet these were the very people the angels chose to first reveal the good news to. This shows us that God's message of hope and joy isn't just for the powerful or the wealthy, but for everyone. The angels didn't announce the birth of Jesus to kings or priests, but to everyday working people. It's a reminder that the love and hope of Christ is available to all, no matter our status, our mistakes, or our past. This Christmas, let's remember that the story of Jesus is not just for the important or the worthy, it's for all of us, right where we are. The radical nature of Christmas is that God meets us in our reality, in our struggles, and offers us a message of forgiveness, peace, and joy. I wish you a very Merry Christmas.
Oh, it's lovely. I love that. I love those messages. Although, I was saying, I'd love to see the architecture of the churches and everything else like that. You know, it'd be lovely to see all that, but you can see all of the special Advent messages as Christmas approaches by visiting gbnews.com/Advent. Merry Christmas. Right, well, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including how green energy could end up damaging our environment more than you think. But first, let's get your news with Will Hollis.
Thank you, Nana. At 1:30, your top story. A wicked predator who was caught on CCTV raping and killing an NHS worker on a park bench has been jailed for life. Mohammed Lido attacked mother of 3 Natalie Shotter while she was passed out in Southall Park, West London, after a night out. Following an Old Bailey trial, Lido was found guilty of her rape and her manslaughter. On Friday, Judge Richard Marks, KC, sentenced Lido to life with a minimum term of 10 years and 8 months. To France now. Emmanuel Macron has named centrist veteran Francois Bayrou as France's new Prime Minister, according to a statement from his Home Office. A few moments ago, Bayrou arrived for an official handover ceremony at the Prime Minister's residence in Paris. Bayrou replaces Michel Barnier, who resigned last week after right-leaning and leftist lawmakers voted to topple the government, plunging France into its second major political crisis in 6 months. Macron is halfway through his second term as president, and Bayrou will be his 4th Prime Minister this year. Back to the UK, a coroner has concluded that a former British paratrooper was unlawfully killed in Ukraine. Daniel Burke died from multiple gunshot wounds in September last year. At the inquest today, the coroner said Daniel was unlawfully killed by someone who purported to be his friend. He died with bravery and valour, but was killed by cowardice and dishonour. Daniel from South Manchester went to Ukraine 2 years ago to support their fight against Russia's invading forces. Downing Street has insisted the government's position on Syria is very clear after 2 cabinet ministers expressed differing views on the Commons vote on the UK military action in the country in 2013. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband says he does not regret blocking British intervention in Syria when he was Labour leader after the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, suggested the UK's hesitation allowed the Assad regime to last for longer. Speaking today, Miliband defended his decision, saying there had been no clear exit strategy and he had not wanted to put British troops in harm's way. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has fled to Moscow after rebels launched a major offensive against the government, ending the Assad family's 50-year rule of the country. The UK economy shrank for the second month in a row in October as concerns about the budget continue to weigh on confidence. The Office for National Statistics said output fell 0.1% following the 0.1% decline recorded for the previous month. The figures showed zero growth in the powerhouse services sector, with manufacturing and construction declining at a pace of 0.6% and 0.4% respectively. The ONS says activity had stalled or declined, with pubs, restaurants and retail among sectors reporting weak months. And your last one for now. According to reports, an alleged Chinese spy suspected of having links to Prince Andrew has been banned from entering the UK on national security grounds. The man, known only as H6, was found to be a close confidant of the Prince and was reportedly invited to the Duke's birthday. The Home Office has accused the individual of covert and deceptive activity, acting on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. Buckingham Palace has declined to comment at this time. Just gone 4:30. Those are your latest headlines. We'll have more in about 30 minutes.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a change on the way. For many of us, something a bit brighter tomorrow. We'll finally see a bit of blue sky. By Sunday, it'll be grey again, but it will, at least by then, be a little bit milder. Grey and chilly for most today. Bit of drizzle here and there. It's a bit of a messy weather picture, but this line of rain tracking south will introduce clearer skies behind it. And that will be spreading its way right across the south by tomorrow. But certainly tonight, it'll stay cloudy in the south. That keeps the temperatures up with the clearer skies. Certainly in eastern Scotland, we will see some frost here. But we should also see some sunshine across Scotland, northern England, North Wales. Also something a bit brighter tomorrow compared to the gloom of recent days. There's still going to be some showers coming into northern Scotland. A bit of snow on the tops of the Scottish mountains too. Rain showers filtering at times into the north of Northern Ireland and coming down through the Irish Sea into North Wales. But the cloud edging away. It'll still be pretty drab early doors over East Anglia and the southeast, but even here, by the time we get to lunchtime, that cloud should be breaking up to reveal some sunshine. We haven't seen much of that this week across the south. So many places seeing sunny spells, still a few showers in North Wales, but the showers tending to fade across Scotland, but only to allow a bit more in the way of rain and drizzle to come in through the afternoon here, and the breeze also starting to pick up. Temperature-wise, 6s and 7s as they have been for much of the week, but of course a bit of sunshine will make something of a difference. By Sunday, well, the sun in short supply again. We're covered in cloud, but milder air is in place. Rain and drizzle over western hills and around the coast, turning very wet across northwest Scotland by the end of Sunday. Many areas just dry and cloudy on Sunday, but the temperatures double figures at least. In fact, many places 11 or 12 degrees Celsius. Do need to watch that rain in the northwest. Could really build up on Sunday and into Monday as well.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Issues towards Edinburgh for the Forth Road Bridge. The southbound side is closed off. There's a police incident causing delays. Westbound M62 struggling as well. Eccles through towards Birchwood. That's junction 11 to 12. A breakdown there causing delays. A lane closure still in place. A collision on the westbound M4 still in the process of being recovered. So lane 1's coned off and it's slow from 8 and 9 at Maidenhead through towards Wokingham and Bracknell. That's junction 10 westbound. 2 lanes out on the anti-clock M25 Brentwood to the M11 turn off, junction 28 to 27. 2 of the 4 lanes out, a broken down lorry being recovered there, and all the traffic in the northbound M5 roadworks being held at Tiverton 27, queuing back to Columpton at 28, whilst a collision there is dealt with.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
39 minutes after 4 o'clock. Welcome back. I'm Nana Acquia on GB News. I'm in for Martin Daubney. Now, the government is unveiling an ambitious action plan to decarbonise the UK, but many are sceptical as to whether it'll actually lower energy bills. Energy Secretary Ed Miliband wants to increase the use of onshore wind power to get the country off the apparent rollercoaster of fossil fuels. Well, joining me now is the Director of Export Unlocked, Richard Bartlett. Richard, welcome to the programme. Look, I'm sure most people want close to home, sustainable, renewable forms of some sort of energy, and we all want a clean environment to live in. But is this really a realistic plan? Net zero 2030 or 2035 or 2050, they're planning to use wind farms. I'm just at a loss to understand. The infrastructure's not there. I can't see how it's going to work.
Yeah, and we've been on this before, Nana. You remember talking about this recently in the last month. It's a really ambitious, and you know, you've got to accept that Ed is very ambitious. The reality is this is just going to drive up cost. It's going to cause mayhem in lots of things which everybody's pushing us towards electricity, cars and etc. But we are gas and oil very reliant, and we have to have a strategy and a plan in place. You know, we all want to be greener, as we've said, but we have to have a clear strategy, and costs at the moment are just increasing everywhere. And all these wind farms and everything else, where's all this money coming from? He's talked about 40 billion investment. Where does it come from? And also the one thing that people don't really understand, and from Ed's point, and I'd like him to talk about this, is how do you create the infrastructure of the UK when everything is driven by lorries? We have lorries, we have railway, lots of things in oil and gas. That's what it's used. How do you suddenly change that overnight within a 5-year period? They can't even get the HS2 running in the correct time. So you imagine this, we're going to put a load of money into it. It's going to drive up costs to the consumer. Everybody's sceptical. So when you're sceptical, you don't invest or you don't want to put energy into it. So I think they need to have a clear strategy of how they're going to go forward with this, Nana.
Well, I mean, if we take the electric cars and we take the infrastructure that should be in place but isn't in place, I mean, I was reading an article only earlier about the north-south divide. You can't get from north to south using electric chargers because, well, you're not. It's literally impossible because you can't drive far enough to get to the next one.
Yeah, and I'm a prime example of that. If I'm travelling from the north down to the south side to Cambridge and I'm working, electric car sounds great in principle, but actually the amount of charging I have to do, and then I have to stop somewhere for another hour and 2 hours. And then what happens when I get to that service station? There's only 2 pumps and they're both taken. It's just absolutely crazy. And then there's certain pumps that are used for certain cars. So it just becomes an absolute joke. And I remember maybe a year ago working on a project with the German automotive, and they were saying that in the UK, our kilowatt and everything else is at a much lower rate than it is. So a lot of things have to be redone and reinvested. And again, we're still nowhere near there. So again, it's great with all these ideas, but the reality is there is a north and south divide, and it just creates that bigger confusion, cost, and everything around that. And, I think Ed should talk to the oil and gas industry and see are there ways we can make this easier, more energy efficient to support, because I was doing some figures on this, as you know, I like to do my figures. It could actually have an effect of over 100,000 jobs in the oil and gas industry, what he's trying to do. So on one hand, he's creating wealth in somewhere, but on the other hand, he's destroying an industry what's been there for many years and has supported the UK economy very well.
Well, also there are gaps in the whole process. So everywhere you look, it doesn't all string together. For example, wind farms, right, that's great, but you can't transport the electricity, you can't store the electricity. And before you build all the farms, you need to have that mechanism in place. Solar panels, well, you saw what happened in Anglesey when there was a flood. And if we're going to have more floods, well, that whole solar farm was pretty much destroyed. So it's we all want to do renewable things. If you were going to save CO2 or release less CO2, you wouldn't choose an electric car. You wouldn't make electric vehicles. So I can't see how he's expecting the public to just go along with this when we can all see the gaps in it and we're supposed to be subsidising it as well.
Yeah, and you've seen that already with the slowdown in the electric vehicles. I mean, 3 years ago when I thought, and we're all the same, we all thought maybe this is a good idea, and then we realised that we can only go 50 miles or 100 miles down the road, and then we have to keep, plugging it in, and it just destroys our work time and in an environment where our motorways are full anyway. So the worry was, do you get stuck somewhere in an electric car? The structure, if you think about it, when you think about businesses rely heavily on imported goods, heavily. So, imported goods are coming in all forms, air freight, road freight, sea freight. They all have a carbon emission within that. Now, the EU have obviously introduced the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which will come in about 2026, and the UK is introducing that in the 2027. So they have to look at plans, and Ed really needs to get on the table and really needs to get sensible with this and say, look, we have a plan, but it has to be a working plan. And all this nonsense about having heat pumps in every house, how's that going to work? They cost a hell of a lot of money. They don't work efficiently, as lots of people are saying. You're going to have warm water in the winter coldness. How does a pensioner now think when he's had everything taken away from him? Now he's seen the news recently with that. He's thinking, this is just an extra cost to me. And it's very worrying.
All right, well, Richard, really good to talk to you. That's Richard Bartlett. He's the director of Export Unlocked. Well, earlier, Ed Miliband spoke to reporters and defended his new plan.
Will still be able to voice their concerns about onshore wind projects, but the government is saying something important, which is we need to build this clean energy infrastructure, because if we don't, we're going to remain exposed as a country, and it's the British people who will pay the price. Now, we do want communities to have a say. We do want communities to be able to benefit, to have direct benefit if they host clean energy infrastructure, but the message from government is we've got to build this energy infrastructure for energy security, for good jobs, for lower bills, and indeed to tackle the climate crisis.
Yeah, well, what I want to know is how do you complain about it if you're not happy about what's going on? I mean, they're meddling with the planning law, so that can't happen. But hopefully Christopher Hope will be asking that question. But Royal Mail has been fined more than £10 million for missing its delivery targets. But does this mean that you might have to wait a while for your presents to be delivered? I'm Nana Acquia on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Joined by international life coach Cheryl Findlay, who has joined forces with a Liverpool business owner, Kate Hill, of sustainable sportswear brand Lola Star, to empower women and inspire women across the nation. And to celebrate this partnership with the new Lola Star collection, the two will be hosting an exclusive event next Saturday.
The sportswear brand was launched after, well, your story. You lost how much weight?
So 16 stone, which is over £220, which I know is quite significant. But during that kind of decade-long journey, I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about what it takes to be successful, to be happy, to be well, and to just live an incredible life every day.
Are you giving them goals to work towards or helping them structure their life?
Yeah, so I don't give out goals, absolutely not. It's all about whatever an individual wants. So what we do to begin with is we understand, like, where are you now? Where are you thriving? Where do you feel really happy and excited in your life? And what's lacking? Like, where would you like to feel better? Where would you like to improve? And then we take it from there.
So I'd love to take that on board. I'd love to be my true self and fulfil my potential. So have you got any practical tips on how to do that?
Yeah, so we start with clarity, right? Like, you need to know, it's such a busy, fast-paced world we live in. There's so much sensory overload. You know, it'd be so easy to be distracted. So we need to kind of quiet all that noise down and start with, where do I want to focus? Pick 2 or 3 things. Where do I want to focus? And then we define the goal. What would I like that area of my life to look, not just look like, but feel like? And then we take it from there. So that's where you would start. I actually had a cancer diagnosis in 2019.
Oh.
And I just decided if I was going to be lucky enough to be on the other side of it, I wasn't going to play small anymore.
GB News, the people's...
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, welcome back. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? I'm Nana Aquia, this is GB News. Now listen, Ofcom have fined Royal Mail £10.5 million for missing its post-delivery targets in the last financial year. And the fine is Royal Mail's second in 2 years, and it comes as analysis suggests that public trust in one of Britain's oldest institutions is falling. Well, let's get the thoughts now of former Post Office Minister Paul Scully. Paul Scully, welcome. Is it over for the Royal Mail? Let's be honest. I mean, you've got Amazon, you've got all the others. Do we really need them now? I mean, they don't deliver anything on time.
Well, look, is it over? No, I don't think it is. They're really in tough times because we asked them to do a lot of different things. We have this expectation, the universal service offer, that means they have to deliver 93% of first class, 98.5% of second class, but they're clearly failing to do that. Most people now want parcels in and out, like you say about Amazon and all these sort of things. That's what they want to compete with because that's where the money is. They're losing money hand over fist because of the reliance and the expectation on delivering letters, which they're failing to do.
These days, I'm just curious. I was just looking. I mean, what is it? 12. How much is a first class stamp? Do you know?
No, I don't actually, because I don't. I just bought. They're a lot, but I can't. I just bought a load, but by the book.
They are a lot. I was looking at a book of how many is it? 12 for £12.99 or something. That can't be right. 4, sorry, for £12.99. Wow.
Yeah, well, because most people use email now, and as I say, parcels. So they're getting a shrinking market. They're trying to chase a shrinking market. So you don't get the economies. It becomes very expensive, as I say. The infrastructure's still the same. They're in a really hard position.
I've just looked on Amazon. Amazon are actually selling them $43.99 for a pack of 20. I mean, you know, who is going to be wanting to do that? I'm tempted to send a Christmas card to myself and see how long it takes it to arrive, because that's the problem with the Royal Mail. It just doesn't work anymore, and every other industry does a better job. What percentage of their mail is actually sent through Royal Mail? Do we know?
No, I don't know, because as I say, so much of it is parcels, and so if it's a letter, it pretty well all goes through Royal Mail.
Yeah.
But parcels, they can't compete because they've got to modernise, and they want to modernise, but they need the infrastructure and investment to be able to do so. But they're piling a lot of that money into propping up their letter delivery service. By the way, if you want to post those letter to yourself, that Christmas card, you've got to get it done second class by next Wednesday. First class, you've got to do next Friday. So there's your test.
Yeah, God, I'll do that. And 10.5 million, that's quite a bit, really, isn't it, for missing post? Why have they been charged or fined so much?
Because they were fined the year before as well, and it was this year's double. Because as I say, they're on a slippery slope down. This is why they're subject to takeover bid by Daniel Kretinsky, who already has a shareholding in the Royal Mail. Is a Czech billionaire that's invested in postal services around the world. So he wants to be able to keep letter delivery, but really bolster up the investment in Royal Mail, which is, if it's going to survive, it's going to have a bright future. It needs that investment.
All right, Paul Scully, thank you very much. Right, well, a Royal Mail spokesperson responded to the news by saying high-quality service is extremely important to us, and that it is making changes to deliver it. Well, we shall see, because up next, Rachel Reeves pushes back against businesses who warn that we are headed towards a recession. But does she have the answers, or are their fears real? Well, I suspect that they're in the real world, so they should know. I'm Nana Aquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Bit of a change on the way. For many of us, something a bit brighter tomorrow. We'll finally see a bit of blue sky. By Sunday, it'll be grey again, but it will, at least by then, be a little bit milder. Grey and chilly for most today. Bit of drizzle here and there. It's a bit of a messy weather picture, but this line...